of Genesis, chapter 37. And we will read some Bible portion and passage, and then we will learn some important lesson from this book of Genesis. Especially when we study the history of the Genesis. This book was written most probably in 14 BEC, and it was written by Moses. And during that time, we understand that the patriarch like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they were the main patriarch who founded the clan and main root of this Israel. And because of their life and the call that God has given to Abraham, and he received that call, and after that we find that Isaac and then Jacob, they carry forward that call that God had given to Abraham. And then later on we find that God chose Jacob, and Jacob had 12 sons, and Jacob loved Joseph, and Joseph was the son of Rachel, and Joseph was the favorite son of Jacob. And there we find that there was a favoritism created, and because of this we find in the book of Genesis chapter 37, the brothers of Joseph, they became his enemy, and they hated him, and they were jealousy why the father Jacob is loving to Joseph more than us. And that was the context of this chapter. And there was a culture, actually there was a culture in those days, and they practices that culture. If someone had a dream, and they consider that this dream must be from God, and to interpret that dream, it was very serious, and they consider it, this is the message that God wanted to communicate to us. That was the culture and practice of the Israelite in those days, and whatever dreams they get, and after the interpretation of that, they take it very serious and consider it is from God. And here in this chapter 37, we find that Joseph had a dream, and this dream became actually a main problem and main cause of challenge for even Joseph and to his family, and his brother hated him more. When we read from the following verse, chapter 37, from 4 onwards, it says, verse 5, it says, "Now Joseph had a dream, and he told it to his brother, and they hated him even more. So he said to them, 'Please hear this dream which I have dreamed. There we were binding slaves in the field. Then, behold, my sheep arose and also stood upright, and indeed your sheep stood all around and bowed down to my sheep.' And his brother said to him, 'Shall you indeed reign over us? Or shall you indeed have dominion over us?' So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words." And then verse 12 says, 12 following from the verse 12 and following verse, when you read again, the Joseph had one more dream. Verse 10, it says, "So he told it to his father and said to his brothers, and his father rebuked him and said to him, What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall your mother and I and your brother indeed come to bow you down to the earth before you?" And this brother envied him, but his father kept the matter in his mind. Even he had two dreams. Verse 9 it says, Then he dreamed still another dream and told it to his brothers and said, Look, I have dreamed another dream, and this time the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars bowed down to me. So he told it to his father and his brother, and his father rebuked him. Here is the context, and this is the context. Joseph had two dreams, and because of these two dreams, his father and his brother hated him more, because they understand that this dream is from God, and God wanted to communicate to us, and Joseph will be like a leader over us, and he will govern us, and that is the understanding they got, and they could easily interpret this dream. They could easily interpret this dream, and because of this Joseph had to face on this challenge from his brother, and they hated him, and they became his dead enemy. That is what we learn from this chapter, and this was the context. But here I would like to highlight some important lesson that we should learn from this book and from the life of Joseph. When we read the verse 28, I would like to read this verse 37, chapter 37, verse 28. It says, Then midnight raiders passed by, so the brother pulled Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver, and they took Joseph to Egypt. The first lesson I would like to highlight from the life of Joseph. God has a plan even in adversity. God has a plan even in the adversity. Here, Joseph, his brothers, hated him, and they put him into the pit, and despite of putting him into the pit, they wanted to plot and kill him there, but one of his brother, Reuben, he said not to kill him, and then they decided to put him into the pit, and there they find that there's some Ishmael people are coming, and they are going down to the Egypt, and they thought it is better to sold the Joseph and we'll get some amount of money. But God had a plan for Joseph's life, and that plan was to prepare Joseph for the dream and for the vision that God had given, and the plan that God had for the Joseph. And that is what we learn through this book. And here, the lives of Joseph was not easy. He has to face betrayal from his brother, and he has to face the injustice, and he has to even face the lot of difficulties. But despite of that, God had a plan for his life. In the adversity, in that difficult time, God still had a plan for Joseph's life. And this, we should learn one important lesson. Even when we face difficulties, when we go through the trials, when we face all sort of challenge from in and around, remember one thing: God has a plan for our life. In the midst of adversity, remember God is into it. God is in that situation, and He will not leave us and not forsake us, and He will protect our life. And that is what we find. Of course, his brother were planning to kill him there itself. But see, God put up a grace, and God put a compassion in the heart of Reuben. And then Reuben told not to kill him, better put him into the pit. And then he was put into the deep pit, and then from that pit he was taken up and he was sold to the Ismailites people, Ismailites people group. And then we find later on that how God prepared him there in the Potiphar house. And the lesson that here I would like to highlight is God has even the plan in our adversity, in our difficult time. God has a plan, and that plan God will fulfill, and God will definitely help us to accomplish that plan which He had for us, and He will not let that to be stopped, but He will help us to complete that dream. And that is what I would like to encourage us this morning. And then second thing, when we read the Genesis chapter 37 and verse 7 till 9, it says that there we were binding sheaves in the field. Then behold, my sheaf arose and also stood upright, and indeed your sheaves stood all around and bowed down to my sheaf. And his brother said to him, shall you indeed reign over us? Or shall you indeed have dominion over us? So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. The second thing here, when you read the chapter 40, 41 and 39 onwards, there we'll find the important lesson that I would like to highlight here again. Integrity and faithfulness are rewarded. Here, the Joseph was very honest to share his dream to his brothers and to his father. If he could have hide that and what dream he had, if he could not have said that thing, he would not face that challenge. But he said that. He was honest. And even he faced the temptation, even he faced the challenge, even he faced the injustice, even he was betrayed by his brother, but still then he was faithful. He said his concern, he said his dream, he was honest to share that to his father and his brother. He knew that if I said, they will definitely hate me, and they will try to kill me and plot all the thing to stop that my dreams should not fulfill. But still then he was honest, and he said his dream to his brothers. And from the chapter 40 onwards, you'll find that when he was sold to the Potiphar house, and there also he remained faithful. And whatever works he does, he was doing it faithfully, and God was with him, and God blessed the Potiphar house because of Joseph. And Joseph remained faithful. Even the Potiphar wives tried to tempt him, tried to defile him, but still then Joseph remained faithful, and Joseph was honest, and we find the integrity in his life. He knew that God is there to watch over me, and he is there. How can I commit any sin? And that is what we should learn from Joseph's life. Let us be honest. Let us remain faithful, and God will reward us. God will reward us. Even at that point of time, we will face the consequences, injustice, and accusation, and blame, and all sort of things. But remember one thing, when you remain the honest, when you remain faithful, God will reward you at last. And that is what we learn, that at the last, even though Potiphar's wife had cheated him and she put all the blame on him, and he was put in the prison. But even in the prison, God was with him, and God raised him from that simple uh, prisoner to a officer in that prison. And then later on, we find that God brought him to the Egypt, and he became the prime minister of Egypt. The lesson that we should learn here: let us remain faithful. Let us remain honest, because if we are honest, if we are faithful, God will protect us. God will protect us, and God will definitely be in that situation, and He will not let us down, but He will bring us out and glorify His name through our lives and bless us. And then next lesson, the third lesson, when we read the chapter 40, and from chapter 41 onwards, when you read the entire chapter, here we find that Pharaoh had a dream. And Pharaoh was very smart. Pharaoh was very smart. He did not share his dream even to his officers and all those who were expert on those in those days to interpret the dreams. He told, if you could share my dream, and then you can easily interpret. But no one was there to even tell his dream. They were scared. They were scared. But the this Pharaoh, one officer who was put in the prison, and there Joseph interpreted his dream, and that dream at last turned to be true. And then he remembered that. He told to the Pharaoh, there is a man, his name is Joseph. He can exactly interpret your dream, and I believe he is the able person. Bring him. And then he was brought to the palace in Egypt, and there Joseph interpreted the dream of Pharaoh, and Pharaoh appointed him chief and the prime minister of the Egypt. And there we find that the lesson here I would like to highlight the passage in God's timing. See, to become a prime minister of Egypt, it was not easy task. Joseph had to go through lot of trials. Joseph had to go through lot of difficulties. Joseph had to go lot of temptation, and from this slave to the prison, and from prison to the palace. From slave, this slave went to the prison, and then from prison to palace he went. And the patience, the timing it took, it was not a short period of time. He had to face that all trials in his life. And sometimes we lose our patience. We give up. We are quick to give up. But let us learn this lesson from the life of Joseph. We need to wait upon the Lord and seek Him and ask Him to, Lord, give me the heart of patience, so that I would be able to trust You more and experience all Your blessing in my life. Sometimes we think that delay is denial, but it is not true. Sometimes God's delay is not a denial. It is a blessing for us. And let us ask God to, Lord, give us the heart of patience, so that we would be able to wait for Your time and receive that blessing which You have for us. And then when we read the 45 onwards, chapter 45, and from 4 verse onwards, here we find that Joseph brothers came to Egypt. The reason was there was a famine in the Canaan. There was a severe famine, and many people lost their lives. And Joseph knew that this famine is going to destroy many lives. And these brothers, Joseph brothers, they didn't know that in the Egypt, there will be Joseph who can save our lives and who can provide us food. And when his brother came to Egypt, they asked for the food and all the food items. Joseph could recognize them, and he knew that they are his brothers. And if in the place of Joseph, if someone else, and if we could have been there, we would have thought that this is the right time to teach them great lesson. But here we find that Joseph, he forgave them. He forgave them. And because of his forgiveness heart, and he forgave them and he restored them back. And later on we find that his brothers, his father, and all their lives was restored, and he provided them food, and he provided even to land to them, and their life were restored, and he forgave them and restored them back. Here the lesson for us. Let us learn a lesson. Sometimes we have lot of grudges in our heart, in our mind, and we carry that things in our lives and we don't forgive. And when we carry that grudges, that grievance, and all the bitterness in our life, that would destroy us, not to others. That would destroy us. It is better to ask God, please forgive me and please forgive them. And when we ask the forgiveness, then God is there to reconcile. God is there to restore. And we find that the Joseph brothers and their family was restored back to a good companionship. This family was protected from that disaster and from that destroying, devastating famine. And Joseph could restore them back, and his dream come to the true. And they bowed down before him, and that dream was fulfilled. The lesson here, when God had a plan for his life, when God had a plan for your life, no power on earth, even into heaven, could stop that. Of course, it may take long time. Sometimes we may lose our patience. But remember one thing, God will fulfill his plan in our life, and no one can stop that. Even no power on earth could stop that things, and God will help us to accomplish that. And may God help us to remember one thing, God has promises for each one of us, and he is sovereign God, and he will fulfill all his promises. And Joseph had a dream, and that dream came to be a true, and because of his dream, his entire family also was saved. And even the Egypt, when Egypt also was in the dangerous, and they also was about to face this famine, but Joseph saved their lives. May God bless us and help us to be submissive to God, be patient, be honest, be faithful, be obedient, be hardworking, and be diligent, and ask God to give us the heart of forgiveness, and ask God to give us the life which would really be a blessing for others as Joseph had.